I'm fairly happy that I've got the timing of the lever on the side here and the disc on the front correct at that point. At full travel in the downward position of the plunger, it allows me to install these two screws. That one there, I just need to run that down a bit further. That's right, I've just got those loose at the moment. Now the other two screws, there are cutouts in the ring here which at different points in the travel allow you to get that screw in place. So I can see one in that position, I can get that screw in. And there's another screw here. If I rotate it to that position, I can get the screw in there. So that allows me to get those 4 screws in place. And as I say, I'm happy with the, you'll see that the range of action there is symmetrical. The cutout here is symmetrical about the centre there. So I'm quite confident the timing is correct at that point. So I'll nip those 4 screws up tight. That part looks good. Now there's a return spring here that hooks onto this piece that needs to go on there, so I'll have to get that return spring hooked into place. I'm pleasantly surprised that went very smoothly, that it was no trouble to reconnect that spring. Some springs, of course, were a real nightmare to reconnect once they pop off. That was no problem at all. So some grease, because I haven't put any lubrication in this piece yet. What I'm going to do is force some grease into the edge there at those 3 spots. This will redistribute itself fairly promptly, that grease. Some in there. And some in there. Yeah, run some around that edge there that I can get to. Around that edge there that I can get to. I think that'll do. I think it'll redistribute itself around that circumference now. It already feels nice and smooth. And actually it's fairly quiet compared with what it was previously. So that part's good. Now the other levers that I had out of there, what did they look like? Well, there's a lever at the front. Here. That had 2 spaces underneath it. And the lever drop through here. It's got a return spring, so I'll hook its return spring in place. Which may be easier said than done. We're just saying about troublesome springs. This lever sits in there like that. That spring is pulling it down. Did it sit on the other side of that stud? Like that? Where does that go? No, it couldn't have done. Let's get this spring hooked up. That's that. These two spaces that went underneath, and I know they went underneath because the hole in the spaces is too small in diameter for them to have been anywhere else but at the bottom, because the screw has a shoulder in it that this lever runs around. If I can get this centered correctly. Spring is fighting me here. That's better. I think I want the spring on the other side of this lever because that's I don't like the way it's pulling against the case there, so I'll just shift that. Want it on the outside of that lever. Yes, that way. Like that. That's better. Now it's no longer rubbing on the case. I'm in trouble lining my washers up here. That's better. That's nice and free in its action now. That's good. That's that piece out of the way. What else had to go on here? Oh, there were the other levers. The other levers over this side, weren't there? And they were stacked up. There was a spacer, then a lever. This could be entertaining because I'm not sure I remember exactly how this went. I might have to look at my video in a second. I will. Not sure which way up this piece went now. Right, I'll check. Okay, let's see if I can get this part right then. So we've got our spacer in there, that's correct. Fairly confident this lever fits in here like that. There's a washer goes on there. A spacer washer goes on there. This lever goes on here. I can get that threaded through the case correctly. Like that. There's another washer. And then there's the pin. Or the screw that lot pivots around. See if I can get that down through those washers and levers and in position. That appears to be good. Let's do that screw up tight and check that those levers move freely. They certainly appear to. Now there's a return spring for that lever, which I didn't see earlier because I hadn't got the front off the camera. And I can see that that wire on that spring is a little bit bent, so I'm just going to turn over the end of that with a pair of pliers. These pliers are particularly useful for doing things like that. They're just some cheap pliers. I think they actually came from some hobby shop. They're probably designed for doing links of jewellery chain or something. They're nothing particularly stunning in terms of wonderful materials, but they're great for working on little things like this. Right, so that spring is going to hook from that lever. So it is quite a soft spring, that one, not very powerful. See if I can get that hooked over there. It's just playing a bit hard to get. Yeah, okay, let's try the other end. It might be a bit easier to get started. Here we have that. And that. Yeah, I'm not particularly enthusiastic about the fit of that spring, but it is doing its job. And I can see that the latching action up here, and as I press the release at this point, you'll see that drops back. So that's all good, that's all working smoothly. I'm not 100% happy with the way the way that spring's hooked on there, I'm going to have another go at that. I suspect that could unhook without too much bother. See if I can get that spring hooked over better. Now I'd much rather that came up through the centre there. How am I going to achieve that? Try another pair of tweezers, see if I can encourage the spring to do what I want it to do. No, not that pair. This pair might. Now, whatever ideas I've got for it, it doesn't want to play those games. I'll close the end of that spring up a bit more so that at least I'm happy that it's going to stay where it's put. I might put a little blob of glue on the end of that spring just for good measure, I think. Just to stop it walking. It's certainly very light. That's right, I'd like it in there. I'm halfway there. No, just released that and shifted everything over out of the way. That's better. Try this again. No, and knock that lever and release it. I'm getting very good at that. Just want to get this spring hooked over that lever. Well, that was nearly it. That's it. I've got that spring hooked up in the fashion I prefer. That latches nicely into position, and I'm going to put a tiny drop of adhesive on that end of that spring. No, I don't need to. No, I'm looking at the way that sits, I'm quite happy with that. When I had it sitting the other way around, I didn't like the look of it at all. Okay, that part looks good. Now, I don't know whether the front actually mounts on top of the shutter, will it? No, it won't. Okay. I have to put the plate back on the front. Where's my top? There's my top. This is the base. The flash wire must go right around that body. I'll check and see where that leads. Don't want that trapped underneath any levers, otherwise it will bugger me up for sure. That looks good. That's all fitting nicely. I can put the 4 screws in that hold that front panel in place. And once I've done this, I can glue that leather back down. Now I'm just checking the height of this plate. Make sure it looks like it's sitting level. There's a couple of adjustment screws here which prop this plate up, and I'm not sure why they need to be doing things like that, but obviously they felt that they did. I'm just making sure this thing is square. Let's try. Gone. Screwdriver's gone. Alright, tighten these screws up. All 4 screws tightened up. Check that I haven't caught anything up in there that I shouldn't have done. No, that's all moving smoothly. I'll glue that leather down before I have an accident with it. It's always possible to end up damaging pieces of leather that are flapping around like that. You can catch them on something, and before you know it, it's torn. Just scrape any loose adhesive off the back of this piece. There's less I can do to this piece because I can't get it off there, because the flash boss appears to be fitted over the top of it. I may be wrong on that score, but I don't think so. So we'll start with this piece. Just put some adhesive on there. Make sure I've got good even cover. and fit this into place. That back edge doesn't look particularly stunning, but that's actually dried adhesive from a previous repair, I would say. That's not glue that I've just put there. That's better. So that's that piece done. I need to do its mate. This one's more of a challenge because I've got to poke the adhesive in from the side, really. If we can do that. We can do anything. Alright, that's enough adhesive there. Let's see if we can press this leather down into place. That looks very good. And that little ragged edge there, let's see if we can whip that off. Very good. A bit of naphtha. Just once around those edges, make sure lift off any stray adhesive, squeeze out. And the same on the other side. I'm going over the leather here as well with this. It's the leather's got a bit of dirt and stuff embedded in it. There we go. Yeah, this. What do we got here? Well, they're all marks in the chrome. They're not ever going to come out. This little peg here is for standing the camera up so that it'll sit level on a table. Oh, it's very good in its action, that's ideal. So, what have I got left to do here? Well, I've got to put back the cocking gear and its washer first there, and that little shaft that runs through it. Now fortunately I've got a picture so I know what the important thing is, that this piece sits in the correct orientation when it's done. So as long as that's achieved, I'm as good as gold. It doesn't matter how I achieve that. This piece will only go into that gear. It can go in one of two ways effectively, because it's the line of this line here and the line of this don't line up. But it doesn't matter. Either it's, as a unit, it either sits this way up or it sits this way up. It doesn't matter, as long as the angle of this looks right from the front at the appropriate point. So these two things, they can be cleaned up and can go in, and I don't think there's much cleaning up required here. I'm just going to run a paintbrush through that gear, make sure there's no embedded crap there. That's good. And I'll use a little bit of synthetic grease. We have our washer, thrust washer you might call this. We'll just put that, give that a quick wipe and stick that in position. It sort of sits down underneath that gear, like that. The gear, put some synthetic grease around that. And its mate sat, if I recall correctly, its mate sat about there. I'll go and check that. I'm pretty confident that that's where it sat though. And of course then the shutter would fit to that. Yeah, that was in the cocked position, that's wrong. Got to get this round to the uncocked position. Yeah, I think it was there. Let's see if we can try this. Will it cock? And will it fire? What was that set to? Well, that certainly wasn't cocking the shutter. Excuse me.